term we'll have a bit of a mix of in-person seminars and remote seminars, online seminars. I think probably there's going to be more that are going to be online though. They'll all be at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoons though, so we'll get back to that time slot. So, but without further ado, I'll introduce the speaker today. Elisabeta Lika is a master's student in the department, and Elisabeta is presenting some of her work that will form part of her master's thesis. And so I just chatted, and if you have questions, clarification questions during the talk, you can certainly ask Elisabeta during the talk, and then there'll be time afterwards for more comprehensive questions as well. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Before beginning, I would like to thank you everyone for coming, especially during this time. And I will be presenting my master thesis that I've been working on for the past year. It is titled Estimating the Economic Value of Improving the Ecological Condition of the Saskatchewan River Delta ecosystem. It is a project that is funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and Global Institute for Water Security. I'm part of a research team consisting of my supervisor, Professor Patrick and Professor Ken, and also two other professors from the School of Environment and Sustainability, Professor Graham and Professor T. To be honest, when I was starting to come up with an intro, a killer intro for the presentation, especially to break the ice after such a long time, I was thinking to come up with a joke, but now with all the masks, I don't think it's a good idea because I cannot see your facial expressions, so I will just jump straight to the motivation of my research. The fact that Canada is a huge country with an area about 10 million kilometers square is not an unknown fact. It's the second largest country in the world. But what is worth pointing out is actually, as you can see from the map, the contrast between the area and how the population is distributed across Canada. In 2016, it was calculated that 66% of Canadians live within 100 kilometers in the southern Canada-US border, or 2 out of 3 Canadians. On the other hand, Canada, it has the capacity to supply ecosystem services at a higher rate than the global average, and it's one of the five countries that holds 70% of the world's wilderness. So, as you can see, a really contrast between the natural capital and also how the population is distributed. Because of this geographical distribution, there is a high probability that most of Canadians do not get to visit or to directly benefit from a lot of this natural capital of ecosystems and their services. Does this mean that they do not value these ecosystems? Well, according to the theory, to the total economic value framework, people, they hold 2 types of values to ecosystems and their services, the use values and non-use values. Intuitively, use values require a direct interaction with some aspect of the ecosystem, while non-use values, they're trickier because they arise only due to the knowledge of the existence of the ecosystem and its service for future generations. Is this the case in Canada? Do Canadians hold use and unused values for ecosystems and their services? There have been some important surveys and studies that have been conducted across Canada, which actually, based on the results, as we can see, Canadians do hold non-use values comparable in magnitude for ecosystems and their services as compared to the use values. Is this the case for my study? Before moving to that, I would like to give a brief explanation what's the use of non-use values, knowing that there are so many challenges that accompany the process of putting an economic value to non-use values. Why do it, apart from the literature of non-market valuation? There have been studies that have shown the importance of non-use values in policy decision-making process in courts, and the benchmark of the importance of non-use values is the 2010 BP oil spill, or the Deepwater Horizon, where the results of the study conducted on behalf of the state of Louisiana, they showed that damages to natural ecosystems were at $17.2 billion compared to recreation values, which were only at $700 million. And now the big question that I've been trying to answer for the last year, are Canadians willing to pay for the restoration of the Saskatchewan River Delta, even if they not or never will directly benefit? The three goals of my study, as you can see, are to estimate the monetary values that Canadians place on different delta restoration scenarios, and this is done using the stated preference approach and the willingness to pay, to capture the amount of money that Canadians are willing to pay. And then the second goal is to understand how people's preferences and value differ, or the fancy title of heterogeneity. And then the third goal, to compare the benefits of the restoration with its associated costs. The third goal is not the primary goal of my thesis, so I just aim to provide some rough estimation on the comparison of the benefits derived by my econometric analysis and some costs. And I haven't started working on this, the estimation of the cost yet on this goal, so I appreciate your feedback, especially on this part, and any recommendation or suggestions how to approach the third goal. Saskatchewan River Delta. Knowing that Saskatchewan River Delta is not the only delta in Canada, there are also the Fraser-Mont, the Mackenzie, the Peace-Athabasca Delta. It is normal to ask why this is the study site. Well, Saskatchewan River Delta is located in between, it crosses the three prairies of Calgary, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. It has an area of 1 million hectares of wetlands, waterways, low-lying forest, and it is very rich in biodiversity. What makes Saskatchewan River Delta a good study site? It has a huge ecological significance. It is home to lots of wildlife, including the moose, the muskrat, fish, birds, 43 species of fish, including lake sturgeon, which is also listed as an endangered species and is under consideration for inclusion in the Species at Risk Act. It is internationally recognized as an important bird area, especially for the waterfowl, and it's calculated that more than 500,000 ducks nest every year in the delta habitat. And also, it's one of the largest inland freshwater delta in North America. Its area that it covers is twice as large as the Prince Edward Island. Another important fact is its historical and cultural significance because it is home to the Cree Nation. And in fact, in June of this year, the Cree Nation has announced the stewardship over the delta, which is a very good progress in terms of involving the stakeholders' voices in the process of decision making that affects different aspects of the delta. I actually read a quote of Professor Tim Jardine saying that unless you are on the top of a mountain, then you're always downstream of someone else, and some are more downstream than others. Unfortunately, this is the case for the Saskatchewan River Delta. It has been threatened by a lot of human intervention activities, especially with the main cause, the threat, the hydropower, two electrical dams, which are built in 1960s, the Grand Rapids Dam in Manitoba, and then the Campbell one in Saskatchewan. Agricultural irrigation is another source of threat to the ecosystems and the services of the delta, and then industrial use, household use. In the agricultural irrigation, it's also that current debate going on the $4 billion irrigation that is proposed and approved to be happening in the province, but that's another topic. So the causes of the delta, there unfortunately a lot. We have a decline in the level of fish, in the level of breeding ducks, in the level of muskrat, an increase in the level of mercury in the water. We have changes to the timing of seasonal water flows, which has led to a natural flooding, but also to drainage of the area, drainage of wetlands, and unfortunately, I can go on and on with other threats and consequences to the ecosystem. In order to provide the economic valuation of non-market values of the delta, the steps that I have followed are, they start with the choice of the discrete choice experiment as the elicitation method. The choice of the discrete choice experiment as the elicitation method is based on how the research question makes sense to be framed in in a policy decision context, because the changes to the delta are viewed as changes to different levels of attributes, to different aspects of it, rather than to the delta as a whole. Then the discrete choice experiment, based on what it means and how it's defined and what it includes, is considered to be more appropriate than other elicitation methods, such as the contingent valuation. The second step is the selection of ecological indicators as attribute for the choice sets. And this is a very important part that has taken a lot of time constructing the survey, because the validity and reliability of the results heavily relies on this step. So I'd like to dedicate a separate slide on that. And then comes the choice set construction, which has been done using the engine software. The D-efficient Bayesian design has been constructed, and we have generated from this design 60 choice situations, which then have been combined in 10 blocks of 6 choice sets, and each person that participated in the survey was randomly assigned to one of these blocks. That will make more sense when you see the choice set in a bit. And then another step is the survey pre-testing, which includes the focus groups. We have conducted 3 online focus groups with randomly selected individuals from the panel that Canadian Hub for Applied and Social Research has. And then we have also done the pre-testing of the pilot survey online. It has been distributed to a representative sample of 400 people across Canada. And a lot of insightful feedback starting from various issues of the survey, such as length, clarity, simplicity of the language, and description of the attributes, but also the prior coefficients which were taken from the data generated from the pre-testing were included in the final choice set construction. And then the final survey, it was administered by the Canadian Hub for Applied and Social Research. We distributed it online on a national level to a representative sample of 4,000 people. But for the purpose of this survey, only a subsample of 965 respondents will be used, and that has to do with the way that the survey was set up, because we included different versions, not using only, but that's for future research, and the survey has included not only the discrete choice experiment, but it has also other formats, including the contingent valuation and willingness to accept. The econometric analysis, I'm currently working on this, and I am approaching it, I'm analyzing results using the random utility model, which I'm sure you all know, that this is that people maximize their well-being by they make alternatives that maximize their well-being subject to constraints. In this case, the constraint is their budget. And then I have used different probabilistic models, so far 3, to derive the welfare estimates, the willingness to pay, and to account for observed and unobserved heterogeneity. The last step, as I told you before, is to collect estimates of costs associated with the delta restoration, which then can be used as input in a more thorough cost-benefit analysis. And the rational use behind attribute selection. So this was like a contest which attributes to include in the survey in order for them to meet all the criteria to be measurable, to be interpretable, applicable, and comprehensive. And it was a long process, including literature review, meetings with our team members, research team members, and then also the focus groups and the pilot study, as I told you. And winners are lake sturgeon, waterfowl population, muskrat abundance, habitat in healthy ecological condition, and special attention was given also to the cost attribute, to the payment vehicle, which based on similar studies in developed countries was chosen to be an annual tax which households would have to pay for the period of 20 years if they chose one of the alternatives, including ecological restoration of the delta. And this is the output of that long process. So the slide speaks for itself. This is a sample of an example of an actual choice set, which was presented to respondents, and they were presented with 3 different alternatives. The first alternative is the status quo alternative, which represents expected outcomes on the non-monetary attributes over the period of 20 years if no conservation project would take place. And their levels, they're expressed in percentages, but in addition to that, also explanation, really explicit explanation in words were included because as it was tested in the focus groups and the pilot study, it was found helpful to provide a clear information and better understanding for the respondents prior to selecting the attributes. So they're expressed in percentages. For example, for the lake sturgeon, the status quo would be 3,500 out of a conservation target, and the same logic is used for the waterfowl, for the muskrat, and for the habitat in healthy habitat. And the annual cost, which associated with the status quo, as it makes sense, is 0, and then alternatives A and alternatives B, they represent the expected outcomes that would happen under 2 out of many possible restoration scenarios over the delta. They do more for the delta, but also they cost more to the households. And this slide includes all the levels that have been used and assigned to the attributes, to the non-monetary attributes, and also to the annual cost. So this is just to, not to go into too many details because it's too wordy as a slide, but just to give an idea what levels were. And the econometric analysis. So 3 models have been used for the econometric analysis so far. I do plan to use also the latent class model and then compare results with random parameters, but so far I have been able to run the multinomial logic model, the MNL with interactions, and also the random parameter logic model. And of course, as we're used to see in many papers, we start with the simple one, the multinomial logic, which despite its disadvantages, it has the advantage that it is simple to estimate, and it gives an idea of the importance of all the attributes to explain the respondents' preferences. And then I move to the MNL with interactions. In the case that I will present in the slide, but I'm not done yet with this model, I have interacted actually the residence of respondents with the cost attribute, especially if they're residing in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, and I wanted to see if that would have any effect on how willing they are to pay for the restoration projects. And the third one is the random parameter logic model, which helps account for any unobserved heterogeneity. These are some preliminary results. I want to emphasize that I still have to work on the cleaning, on the prior analysis part of the data. I have to do some adjustments and test of scope, and also to drop the naysayers and protest responses, but this is just to give a flavor of what I expect to have for the results of the econometric models, and to see if Canadians are willing to pay for the restoration of the river delta, even if they do not or never will directly benefit. As we can see from both the multinomial logic results and the multinomial with the interaction, actually Canadians do prefer higher levels of all the non-monetary attributes. The cost attribute, as we expect, has a negative sign and is significant. So my model is not crazy so far. And then the status quo parameter, it is associated with the utility that people have for the status quo in comparison with alternative A and B. It has a negative sign. So actually my expectation or my hypothesis was that Canadians would be less willing to choose the status quo over alternative A and B, and the negative sign confirms it so far, but then I had to check in further analysis if after dropping all the protest responses and bid sayers that will change. With regard to the willingness to pay, which they show the strength of preference for each of the attribute levels, we see that the willingness to, Canadians are willing to pay more money as compared to the other attributes for the habitat in healthy ecological condition. And in simple words, they are willing to pay 2.3 Canadian dollars per year for a 1 unit improvement in the level of the habitat in healthy ecological condition. And with regard to the multinomial logic model with the interaction term, the negative sign of the interaction of the status quo and the province is negative and significant, which would mean that, in simple words, that Canadians that live in the prairies aren't willing to pay more for the restoration programs relative to people or respondents residing in the rest of the provinces. And the third model that I have run is the random parameter with model. And in this case, I have assumed a normal distribution, which would allow for both positive and negative preferences for the attributes. And all non-monetary values are assumed are randomly distributed. So the results for each parameter are 2, the mean preference, which would show the preference for that particular attribute, and then the standard deviation across preferences. The statistical, they're all statistical significant, which would imply that actually it's a hint for some heterogeneity across preferences in uncontrolled or unobserved heterogeneity across preferences. So I still have to work more on the econometric analysis part, and as I mentioned also on the cost benefit section, but the contributions of the study are expected to be in 2 aspects. Although there have been some non-market and non-use studies in Canada, in my knowledge, I have included limited empirical evidence, but to be honest, I haven't found any so far. I hope that the study will contribute to the literature to add to the body of knowledge. And the other aspect of contribution is in the policy decision context. I hope that the study will, and I expect the study to contribute to the decision-making process by highlighting the importance of non-use values of ecosystems, services, promote restoration actions, and through the provision of the benefit estimates to help also be an input in more detailed cost-benefit estimates. And with that, I want to conclude my presentation by thanking everyone, by thanking my committee members, my supervisor Patrick, Professor Ken, Professor Sabine, and I'm open for questions and comments, and I appreciate any recommendation that you have how I should approach the rest of the econometric analysis based on your experience. So, thank you.
Thanks, Elisabeta. Questions? Maybe I'll start with a very specific question. Your upper limit for the taxation was $345.
Yes.
That seems to be a very specific number. How did you come up with that?
So initially in the focus groups, the levels of the, especially the cost attribute was one debatable and very discussed attribute in the focus group. So we had a higher one. We had it at 625. But then on how people perceived who should pay the taxes and compared to also like their current income and their demographic characteristics, we ended up just lowering the attribute to that level. So yeah, we had it much higher in the beginning, and then it was all that iterative process.
Okay.
Because they were happy, like we had people, everybody wanted to a better delta and more like healthier delta, but then when it came to the level of the cost attribute, that was something that we had to consider,
Okay.
like all the ranges and
Yeah.
all the extremes, and then also based on like other similar studies on river delta studies and river studies in the US.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Jill?
Yeah, really interesting study. Could you
Thank
talk
you.
a little bit more about the value of the specific attributes and those willingness to pay estimates? So you had one that was much higher, it was ecosystem health, what was it called again?
Yeah.
So maybe talk a bit about what does that tell you and how is that described to people, and then I've got another question I'll follow up with after that.
So in both the MNL and the MNL with interactions, we see that the size of the coefficient and the sign of the coefficient, it shows the effect that or the impact size that each of the attributes has on the utility level of people. So for example, if we take Lake Sturgeon, that value 0.068 and a significant one means that would be translated in a utility level of Canadian respondents as going up by 0.068 for a 1 unit improvement of the Lake Sturgeon, which would be a 1% increase in their current level as compared to the conservation target. And they're similar in the magnitude for Lake Sturgeon, waterfowl, and muskrat, but then we see the habitat in healthy ecological condition, which would be the restored wetland area in the delta. That is a higher value as compared to before, so it would mean that as also it's translated in the willingness to pay, people are willing to pay more for a 1 unit improvement in that habitat health as compared to other attributes.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Is there anything else in your survey data that might explain why people are particularly interested in that attribute?
We have the way that we have described the attributes in before people being presented with the choice sets. We have tried to like not emphasize any of the attributes as, you know, not to bias their responses, like highlighting or emphasizing, like distinguishing the habitat or like any other attribute as like to the others. And in no case we have mentioned the word like non-use, like saying that you're not going to use it, but based on their characteristics as what makes them an ecological indicator of the health of the delta, that was left to the respondents to, you know, to have their own perception which one is more important and which one would, you know, impact more the delta health than the others. But yeah.
Can I have just follow up on that? So how will you then take this into the cost benefit section of your study?
So for the cost benefit side, for the benefit, what I aim to do, but as I said, I don't have a really 100% clear approach right now. So I aim to estimate the aggregate willingness to pay for the restoration of the delta, and then find some rough cost estimates. So like the foregone benefit for the agricultural irrigation, or as we have like some studies in the States, like removal of the dam, or like the work of the dam, like, you know, like modification of the work process, and also like other explicit foregone benefits to other users. But yeah, not really like go very deep into the cost benefit analysis part. So yeah, this is what I hope to do and my idea right now, but as for this part, I'm open to any feedback and recommendations, so yeah.
Thanks.
Daniel?
Yes, a very simple question that in the multinomial logic models,
Yeah.
I know you have the different attributes and you're comparing with one, right?
What do you mean with one?
Well, I don't know, for one of the attributes you have 5 attributes, right?
Yeah.
And you are comparing, you drop one and you're comparing again this one, right?
I haven't dropped any attributes so far. So far the utility levels, the utility equations in this model would be like all like 3 alternatives, the status quo alternative with a fixed levels for the attributes, like the one that I showed, like the 35. So this would be the first utility equation, and then the other two utility equations for alternative A and B. But I haven't dropped any attribute, if I'm understanding your question right.
Okay, and in respect to regarding to the percentage that you are using in the attribute,
Yeah.
what do you think what will happen if you change that the composition of each attribute? Because you have it's very specific. You have 60%, 5%, 15%, for example. So, what could happen if you change that parameters?
So because all the coefficients would be like as impact on the utility level as per 1 unit change, as per 1%, that would like address that problem that you're saying, like if I didn't present 5% but I presented like 6%, for example. When it comes down to both the marginal willingness to pay is per 1% change in the level of attributes, but also to the parameter coefficients, it's a per 1 unit change, so per 1% change. So that would like really like address that problem with the percentage that is chosen for one of the alternatives. And as I said, those the way that the design, the choice set was constructed, all these levels, the way that they were combined, they like gave, and we included 2 alternatives out of many possible alternatives, like combination of these levels to the respondents. So it comes down to the unit change in the end. And also what I wanted to emphasize is that the main goal wasn't actually to focus on the ecological indicators, but they're used as a mean to like for the restoration of the delta. So not more as what lake sturgeon is more important than the waterfall, but like how their willingness to pay for these changes would actually be translated in willingness to pay for the restoration of the delta ecosystem.
The last question.
Yeah.
Sorry. And about the survey process.
Yeah.
So I understand it well. You just send the survey randomly to everyone in Canada?
No, unfortunately it's much more complicated than that. So we collaborated with the Canadian applied hub for applied and social research, or like XSSRL, how we used to know it. So they have their panel data and they have their participants in the panel. So they did send out the survey in order for the sample to be a representative sample of the Canadian population. So like distributed across provinces and different range of outcomes, and not targeting only, for example, the Saskatchewan residents. So yeah,
But the
it
person
was.
have to take the decision between reply the survey and don't reply
Oh
the
yeah,
survey.
yes.
Yeah, I was
Totally,
asking
yeah,
because-
it's distributed, it was distributed online, so they had the option of course, answering it or not. And then I haven't come up with a number yet of like uncompleted responses so far, so yeah.
Yes, I was asking because maybe the results are biased by the person that want to reply the survey are the person that want effectively protects that attribute, so the ecosystem. So probably the person that don't care didn't reply that.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, that's
But
that's
it is
a
a
real,
problem of the
that,
survey,
yeah, that's a problem with the surveys. Like what, how we have tried to like mitigate that is by telling people that your by explicitly telling people that your answers are consequential, and like through the cheap talk text, telling that they have to think as this was going to like take place like for real, and if this going to happen, they will have to pay all those bid amounts or like cost amounts that they're. So it's more on the structure of the survey, how they're addressed, but then we will never know.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Other questions? Maybe I'll ask another
Yeah.
one. Did you ask, in the survey, did you ask any of the, did you ask the respondents if they had heard of or knew about the
Yes.
Saskatchewan River Delta?
Yeah, so actually these were the two first questions. Have you ever heard
Okay.
of the Delta before, and after responding to this survey, are you planning to go and visit the Delta? So this is another analysis that I plan to do in order to see
Okay.
for the non-use values,
Right.
how really non-use values are
Yeah,
there. So yeah,
right, yeah.
yes.
So
these
you'll
are-
be able to tease out whether the willingness to pay of people who know about the Saskatchewan River Delta
Exactly.
will be different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I tried to do with that interaction term so far was like as an initial step, like to see if actually residing in either Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Alberta would have an impact, and then the next one is yet to tweak those questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you sort of mentioned it, but for everybody's information, it's not an easy place to get to. It's about a 6-hour drive, of which 4 are gravel, give or
Yes.
take. So it's not an easy place to get to. It's not a place that you see a lot of tourists. So
Yeah.
it's not like a tourist destination as such.
Yeah,
So.
I'm ashamed to say that myself, I've been working on it for a year and I haven't been able to go there, but I'll go with my degree.
Yeah.
It's a prize.
So maybe just, and
Yeah.
your results, was I seeing it correctly that residents of the prairies have a lower willingness to pay than other Canadians, or was I reading that wrong?
They're not willing to pay more.
Okay.
They're not willing to pay more compared to residents
Okay.
in other provinces, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. 'Cause
Yeah.
They're the residents within the watershed, the Saskatchewan River Delta.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
We will see. I
We'll
won't say anything right now because I have to do the prior analysis, so yeah, I'll keep it this quiet.
Yeah. So.
I think the latent class analysis you're talking about doing next would be a really interesting way of exploring the heterogeneity. So have you got any sense of what sort of class membership indicators, what
No,
might
right
you
now,
do?
no.
Okay.
As of right now, no, but yeah.
Do you know what you might think about exploring in that model? Or?
I would appreciate your suggestion
Okay.
before I.
We've got
So
projects
just giving
there,
a diplomatic,
obviously.
just giving a diplomatic
I just
answer
wonder
to a question
What
that.
else was in your survey that beyond the discrete choice experiment? What other information do you have about the survey respondents and like?
So apart from the classical questions on their level of income, education level, household, and everything, there are also some debriefing questions on how they value after they respond to the choice set questions, on like the 1 to 5 scale questions on the importance of the delta as an ecological ecosystem, and also like what they think if the delta should be conserved more, even if it costs more, and other environmental issues. So yeah, I'm planning to use those debriefing questions for that part, but I don't have right now like targeted the exact questions for the latent class actually. So yeah, that's why I even didn't include it as a model there, because I don't want to hypothesize and then not do it. So yeah.
Other questions for Elisabeta? All right. Seeing none, join me in thanking her for a very good. Just a couple of quick announcements. Next week, the seminar will be the college seminar, so those happen on Thursdays, and that will be at 4 o'clock on next Thursday. And so there will be an announcement sent out. It's a WebEx survey, so it's an online, a WebEx. I'm talking about surveys. It's a WebEx seminar, and so you'll be able to access it from your computer. And that one is on mental health. So it's a college seminar next Thursday. So we won't have a departmental seminar on Friday of next week, the Thursday seminar. The week following, which is September 24th, will be a departmental seminar, so Friday at 3 o'clock. And that will be Jill McMillan who's a learning specialist with Student Learning Services, and she'll be talking about academic integrity. So right now, I'm not sure whether that's going to be in person or an online seminar. I have to talk to Jill to figure out which she prefers to do, but it will be a departmental seminar on September 24th. Okay? Very good. Thanks very much.
Thank you.